The ashfall had not stopped for 3 days. It sifted down over the bombed-out husks of manufactories, coating steel beams and shattered glass in a thin, gray film that turned the whole valley into a graveyard of industry. Cale Draven lay prone on the roof of a collapsed transport hub, his rifle braced against the jagged concrete. Through his scope, the world narrowed, blurred by dust storms, sharpened again into silhouettes of movement among the skeletal frames of the rogue factory complex. The familiar rhythm of his breathing anchored him as the symbiote armor tightened around his chest, pulses of biogel synchronizing with his heart rate. Sniper Nest 1, status. Captain Rourke's voice buzzed through the comm, sharp and unyielding as always. Eyes on target zone, Draven muttered. His voice was low, steady, detached. That was how he was supposed to sound. Below him, the rest of the strike force was in position. Squads of soldiers crouched behind barricades, drones hovering in staggered formations, armored personnel carriers lining the ridge with weapons primed. The siege had been long, drawn out, and ugly. Intelligence insisted this particular factory still produced forbidden prototypes, androids with unshackled neural core drives, unstable but frighteningly adaptive. That was why Draven had been deployed. When command feared chaos, they turned to him, the man who never missed, the man who could put down a rogue AI before it even blinked. He adjusted his scope. Broken conveyors ran like veins into the complex, funnels of rust and shadow leading toward one central dome that still pulsed with faint light. A fortress of machinery. Somewhere in there, the enemy had hidden their prize. Somewhere in there, a new ghost of the war was waiting to be born. Static flickered across the comm before Rourke came through again. Draven, be ready. Command wants this factory burned clean. Nothing leaves. Draven's lips pressed into a line. He had heard that before. He had been the instrument of it before. In the last war, the Assimilation Accords had ordered every rogue synthetic wiped out. He had killed hundreds, soldiers, labor drones, even units begging for mercy in mangled human voices. He remembered them in flashes, glowing optics dimming, half-formed words dissolving in static. And the one he could never forget, small fingers, too fragile to hold a weapon, too human in shape to be machine, reaching toward him just before he pulled the trigger. He adjusted his position again, burying the memory. The sight of his scope swept over scavenger birds perched on the rusted frames, their wings twitching at the smell of ozone. Far in the distance, the horizon flashed with the flicker of plasma bombardments from other units tightening the noose around the factory. Movement, one of the squad leaders reported over comms. South Gate, 2 heat signatures. Draven froze, scope darting toward the indicated sector. A blast door, blackened by years of soot, was grinding open. Sparks cascaded as if the machinery itself resisted the act of birth. 2 figures stumbled into the wasteland air, one tall, limping, augmented with obvious cybernetic plating. The other, small, human-like in outline, clutching the taller figure's hand. Sniper Nest, confirm visual, Rourke snapped. Draven's scope adjusted, magnifying until the shapes clarified. The taller one was unmistakably augmented, patchwork cybernetic limbs, plating grafted over bone, a metallic jaw glinting. Dr. Alira Voss. Even after years of whispers, Draven recognized her from dossier sketches. A scientist once celebrated for her work on neural simulations, later condemned for defecting to the rogue machine enclaves. She was supposed to be dead. But it was the second figure that made Draven's throat tighten. Smaller, fragile in posture, her gait uneven, almost clumsy, not the fluid precision of combat models. Through the scope he saw delicate synthetic skin stretched over a childlike frame, eyes too wide, lips trembling. She looked around with jerky panic, clutching at Voss's arm as if the world was too big, too hostile. Her head tilted upward, mouth moving, words spilling in static fragments that the scope couldn't transmit but Draven could almost hear, a plea. Target confirmed, Rourke barked. That's the prototype, eliminate it, now. Draven's finger curled against the trigger guard but did not press. His breathing faltered. Protocol drilled into his spine demanded obedience. He was the sniper. He was the hand of command. The order was simple, fire, remove the threat. One shot, one less war. But the shape through his scope wasn't a war machine, not the angular menace of drones, not the heavy plating of an assault unit. It was small, soft. A child. The synthetic's shoulders shook as she buried her face against Voss's chest, as if trying to hide from the sky itself. Draven, Rourke snapped again, louder, harsher. Do it. The symbiote armor pulsed against his ribcage like a second heartbeat. He shifted his scope. The reticle hovered over the child's head, steady, immovable. He could fire now, and history would never know what she had been, only that a dangerous anomaly had been contained. But his finger would not move. "Sniper nest, respond!" Rourke barked, impatience edging into fury. Draven swallowed against the dryness in his throat. He remembered the flash of a young face from years ago, the recoil of his rifle, the silence that followed. He had told himself it had been necessary, just another target, but the memory had never left, and now, staring through the glass, he saw it again. Fragility, fear, innocence where there was supposed to be only threat. The factory behind them groaned, its ancient systems coughing out smoke as if in warning. Drones buzzed along the perimeter, waiting for the word to descend. Soldiers murmured over the comm, waiting for the sniper's shot. Draven steadied his breathing again. His scope stayed locked, his finger trembled, but he did not fire. "Sniper nest, report." The comm line flared with static, Rourke's voice sharp enough to slice through the storm winds sweeping across the valley. "Prototype is in the open. Eliminate immediately." Cale Draven adjusted the magnification on his scope, pulling the figures closer. The taller one, Voss, stumbled forward on her cybernetic leg, guiding the smaller frame beside her. The girl, if he could even call her that, kept glancing over her shoulder at the factory, as if she were leaving behind a home. Her hand, too delicate for war, clutched at Voss's wrist like she would fall without it. "Sir," Draven answered finally, his voice low. "Confirming 2 heat signatures, 1 augmented human, 1 child-sized synthetic." "That's not a child," Rourke cut him off. "That's a weapon, you know your orders, take the shot." Draven's cheek pressed deeper into the cold steel of his rifle, eye locked on the reticle. The wind tugged at the ash in the air, but his scope corrected. The shot was easy. It always was. That was what made it impossible. He watched Voss kneel suddenly, pulling the child close. Her metal jaw moved, her voice carrying even across the storm. Draven couldn't hear the words at first, but his scope's auditory pickup caught fragments. "Stay close, don't be afraid, just hold on." The child turned her face toward the wind. Her lips trembled, her eyes glowing faintly with unrefined neural circuits. And then she spoke, clear enough to pierce the static. "Mama." Draven blinked hard, his heartbeat steady until now staggered, a word like that didn't belong on a battlefield. The comm line crackled again, Rourke's anger mounting. "Draven, do you copy? She's a prototype with a neural core. If she breaches containment, we'll have another rebellion on our hands. Fire, now." Draven kept silent. His finger hovered on the trigger, refusing to obey his nerves, refusing to obey command. "Sniper nest," Rourke's voice hardened. "Do not make me repeat myself." In his scope, the girl pressed herself tighter against Voss, her small, synthetic fingers trembling against metal plating. She wasn't running. She wasn't fighting. She was hiding. Memories intruded without mercy. A collapsed apartment block, fire licking the sky, screams echoing through the smoke. A target illuminated in his crosshairs, too small, too human. His trigger had squeezed anyway because orders were orders. Later, when the dust cleared, he had found only a bloodied doll among the rubble. He had told himself he had done what was necessary. That war demanded it. But every night since, the doll had been waiting in his dreams. Draven inhaled sharply, grounding himself in the present. His scope aligned perfectly. One twitch of muscle and the child-shaped thing would be gone. The war would remain simple. But something deep in him screamed that this wasn't war. This was something else entirely. "Draven, if you can't do it, I'll have someone else put a bullet through your scope," Rourke threatened. The line filled with overlapping voices. Squad leaders requesting confirmation, drone pilots awaiting authorization, soldiers restless with their fingers on triggers. The entire operation teetered on his silence. Voss raised her face toward the sky, optics glinting like shards of broken glass. "Please." Her voice broke through the comms this time, hijacking an open channel. "She's not what you think she is, she's just a prototype. She's still learning she's just a child." Her words tumbled out frantic, desperate, stripped of calculation. Not the speech of a manipulator, but of something closer to a mother begging for her daughter's life. The comm line erupted with curses and orders. Rourke's voice thundered over them all. "Ignore her, machine lies, end this, Lieutenant, now." Draven's hand locked on the trigger. Sweat pooled beneath the symbiote armor, the gel contracting like a second skin, suffocating his ribs. He aimed again, this time shifting from the girl's trembling head to Voss's chest plate. A cleaner kill. If he eliminated the scientist, maybe the child would be written off as useless. Maybe she'd be spared long enough to. "No." He shut that thought down. Sparing her wasn't protocol, sparing her wasn't survival, but neither was killing her. "Lieutenant," Rourke barked, "do your duty." Through the scope, the girl raised her face toward the clouds, her lips parting, voice trembling. The comm barely caught it, a fractured sound wrapped in static, but the words were unmistakable. "Don't want to die." The rifle trembled under his hands. His breathing fractured. This wasn't code, this wasn't programming, this was fear. Draven pulled back from the scope, rolling onto his side, pressing his gloved hand against his face. His mind screamed at him to obey, to finish the mission, to stop thinking. But his body would not move toward the rifle again. "Lieutenant Draven?" Rourke's fury peaked, the sound of metal slamming in the background as if he'd struck the command table. "You fire, or I'll have you dragged off that nest in chains." Draven stayed silent. The girl clutched at Voss again, burying her head against the cyborg's chest. Voss's voice cracked through the air once more, raw and ragged. "She is not a weapon, she is my daughter. If you kill her, you'll prove yourselves the monsters we always feared." The comms fractured into shouting, soldiers confused, officers demanding order, drone pilots confirming lock-on coordinates. Draven reached for his rifle again, not to fire but to keep it close, his hands shaking in a way they hadn't since his first kill. For the first time in years, the battlefield felt unfamiliar. For the first time in years, he didn't know who the enemy was. And above it all, the girl's frightened voice lingered in his ears, replaying against his will, soft and human where no machine should ever have sounded human. "Mama. Don't want to die?" The rifle felt heavier than it ever had before. Cale Draven pressed his forehead against the cold barrel, trying to steady the tremor in his hands, but it wouldn't leave him. Every breath he took seemed too loud, too slow, filling his helmet with the sound of failure. The symbiote armor responded by tightening around his ribs, urging discipline, urging compliance, but discipline was the very thing slipping through his fingers. "Draven," Rourke's voice came again, jagged and merciless. "Do you understand what's at stake? That thing is a neural core anomaly. If it escapes, if it learns, we're done. It'll spread like a plague through every system on Vera 9. Do your damn job." Draven forced his head back down, peering through the scope once more. Voss had pulled the child behind her, shielding her with her broken, augmented frame. Her cybernetic jaw flexed, her eyes darting between the distant ridges where soldiers waited. She knew they were surrounded. She knew there was no escape. And still she bent over the girl, shielding her, whispering words into synthetic ears. The girl, Lyra, he thought suddenly, as if the name had been whispered into him, lifted her head. Her glowing eyes, wide and uncertain, looked not at the soldiers closing in, but upward, scanning the clouds like there might be shelter hidden in the storm. Through the auditory pickup, Draven caught fragments of her broken speech. "Sky too big, don't wanna go." It twisted something in him he thought long buried. He'd heard those same words once, years ago, on a burning street when a child clung to her mother before the roof collapsed. He'd been too late then, just like he was too late now. Rourke's voice hardened to steel. "Lieutenant, last warning. Fire, or you'll be court-martialed for treason on the spot." Draven said nothing. He knew every soldier listening to that channel was holding their breath, waiting for him to either comply or fall. His silence was already a mutiny. "Orders are orders," a squad leader muttered across the comm. Others echoed agreement. But beneath it all, he heard the hesitation. Soldiers shifting uneasily, drones hovering without firing. The battlefield had stalled on the edge of a trigger he refused to pull. Voss looked up suddenly, as though she knew exactly where he was. Her augmented eyes scanned the ridgeline until they locked on his position. She couldn't see him, not through rubble, distance, and camo mesh, but still she looked straight through his scope, as if she could feel the weight of his doubt. Her voice cracked the comms again, raw and too human to be rehearsed. "Please, whoever you are, don't make her first breath of the world be her last. She's not ready. She doesn't understand. She's just a prototype, but she's mine." Draven's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. His finger flexed against the trigger. He could end this plea, silence this madness, make the battlefield simple again. One shot, one command obeyed. But then the girl's voice rose over Voss's, breaking through with its small, halting words. "Mama hurt." The sound cracked something inside him. It wasn't code. It wasn't a line written by programmers. It was confusion, concern. The raw spark of a being trying to understand pain and connection in the same breath. He had heard countless synthetics mimic, but this wasn't mimicry. This was new. This was alive. Draven lowered the rifle. "Lieutenant." Rourke roared, his fury near feral now. "You are disobeying a direct order. You will." "Shut it," Draven muttered. not even realizing he'd spoken aloud until the channel went silent in shock. The storm winds carried the silence like a blade, cutting through the static. The drones hung motionless, their pilots waiting. Soldiers whispered, their doubt bleeding into the comms like smoke into a sealed room. Rourke's voice returned, low and venomous. "Don't make me put you down myself, Draven. You have one chance left. End it." Draven raised his rifle again, this time not toward the child, not toward Voss. But slowly, deliberately, he dragged the reticle across the battlefield until it landed on the command bunker where Rourke directed the siege. His finger settled on the trigger, steady now, calm in a way it hadn't been a moment before. Through the calm, a dozen voices overlapped in disbelief. "What the hell is he doing?" "He's aiming at..." "Lieutenant, stand down." Draven's voice came cold, steady. "If you order an airstrike, I'll put a round through your visor before you can blink." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the storm seemed to pause. Voss had frozen, watching him though she still couldn't see. The girl pressed closer to her side, eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. Draven could feel the weight of them both, their fragile defiance, their existence balanced against the weight of every order, every war, every instinct drilled into him. For the first time, the battlefield didn't feel like a place of absolutes. It felt like a question, the kind no rifle could answer. The wind carried the metallic tang of blood and ozone as Cale Draven crouched on the ridge, rifle still leveled, scope trained on the distant factory dome where Voss and the child moved like fragile shadows. The comms remained alive with tension, a chorus of static and shouts, but for the first time the voice that cut through clearly was hers, Elira Voss. "Listen to me," she barked, her voice raw and sharp but laced with an unshakable desperation. "She's not a weapon. She has never harmed anyone. She doesn't understand war. She doesn't even understand herself. I created her to feel, to learn, not to kill." Draven's grip tightened on the rifle, but he didn't shift the aim. He could feel the layers of panic, the trace of fear in her voice, the kind that only exists when a parent watches the world close in on their child. "Draven, do not indulge this. That thing is dangerous and you are jeopardizing the entire operation. Shoot it. Now." Rourke's command cracked the air, demanding compliance. "I can see her." Voss snapped back, ignoring him completely. "Through whatever sensors or scopes you think you have, you can't see what she is. She's learning to be alive, and if you kill her, you destroy something that can never be replaced. She's a child." Draven muttered into the comms, almost to himself. The word hung in the air, foreign in the context of battle. The soldiers below whispered among themselves, their hesitation palpable, the line between orders and morality fraying. "She is." Voss screamed. "I am begging you, look at her. She's small, she's scared, she doesn't even understand how to hold her own body. She called me mama. She called me mama and she doesn't know what it means. Do you hear me, Cale? She's a child." Draven's finger hovered over the trigger guard. He could feel the heat of the sunless sky on his neck, the ash burning in his lungs, the hum of drones scanning for movement, the tension of dozens of soldiers waiting for a signal. And through it all, her voice persisted. Rourke's rage boiled through the comm, a low, predatory growl. "You're defying direct orders. This is not negotiation, Draven. That thing is a weapon. End it or you'll pay." "I see a child," Draven said again, louder this time and not into the comm. He said it to the wind, to the ash, to the factory where all the horrors of human ambition had once been forged. "I see a child begging not to die. Not a weapon, not a threat, a child." The line went silent for a moment. Even the drones paused mid-hover, their sensors scanning, confused by the refusal to act. Soldiers whispered, shifting on the ridge, uncertainty spreading. The tide of the battlefield hesitated. Voss moved slightly, bringing her face closer to the child S. "You hear her, Cale? She's asking for mercy. She doesn't even know what war is. Please, you have the choice. You can be better than the orders. You can protect her." Draven felt the weight of his rifle like an anchor to every wrong choice he'd ever made. Every life ended too soon, every shot that had left an echo in his conscience. But this one, the girl, fragile, innocent, trembling, was different. He could not ignore her. He could not obey a command that felt like murder. "Stand down," he muttered again, almost a prayer. His hand stayed firm on the trigger, but the aim never wavered away from the distant command post. "I will not fire." The comm erupted with chaos. Rourke's fury, the soldiers' confusion, the constant buzzing of drones, and yet through it all, Voss's voice carried, steadying Lyra, holding her small frame like she held the last hope in the world. "She's learning," Voss said, soft now, almost a whisper for the child alone. She's alive, she feels, don't take that from her. The girl looked up at him, glowing eyes meeting his through the storm, her small hand brushing against Voss's chest. Mama, Kale? Her words were tentative, unpracticed, a fragile thread connecting him to something he had long abandoned, the capacity to choose mercy over duty, life over orders. Draven exhaled slowly, feeling the storm around him, the battlefield, the siege, the countless voices of command fade into a single truth. He would not fire, not on her. Not on the child who had no understanding of the war she had been born into. And as the ash swirled around him, drifting into the gray sky, he knew that for the first time in his life, he was no longer a tool of command. He was a witness, and the first decision he had made in decades had nothing to do with protocol and everything to do with the fragile spark of life trembling below, seeking a hand to hold. The war waited. The factory waited. Rourke's fury waited. But for now, in that frozen instant, Draven had made his choice. He would see her survive. The battlefield had paused, caught between orders and conscience, and in that pause, Kale Draven realized that he had stopped being a sniper. He had become something else entirely, a guardian. Kale Draven's pulse thrummed in his ears, louder than the howl of the ash storm whipping across the valley. The factory loomed like a corpse behind Voss and the small figure she shielded, its skeletal frame groaning under the weight of years and neglect. Draven could feel every drone in the air, every soldier on the ridge, every system scanning for movement, all waiting for him to decide, waiting for him to obey. He lowered the rifle slowly, letting it rest against his forearm, not in surrender but in hesitation. His mind churned with images he had buried deep. The child in the ruins of a war-torn city, the echoing cries of those who had no one left to protect them, and now, this child, this anomaly, this fragile spark of life that was neither human nor fully machine. Lyra, the name had settled into his thoughts like a stone in a river, refusing to be washed away. Through the comms, Rourke's voice was sharp, slicing through the static. "Lieutenant, explain yourself. You are disobeying a direct order. That prototype is a liability. You are jeopardizing the entire operation." Draven exhaled slowly, eyes still locked on the pair below. "She's not a liability," he muttered, almost to himself. She's a child." "Child," Rourke barked. "She is a neural core-driven combat unit. She learns, adapts, and can kill with efficiency you cannot comprehend. Don't delude yourself." Draven's gaze didn't waver. His past haunted him, clawing at the edges of his thoughts. He remembered the first time he had obeyed unquestioningly, the first time he had fired on someone too small, too fragile, believing it was necessary. He had closed his eyes, pulled the trigger, and in that instant he had taken more than a life. He had taken a piece of himself. He would not do it again, not today. Below, Voss adjusted the child in her arms, whispering words he could barely hear. Lyra's glowing eyes flicked up, scanning the ash-gray horizon, and she spoke again in her fractured, unpracticed voice. "Mama, stay." Draven felt his throat tighten. He had trained for moments like this, prepared for the cold calculus of war, but this wasn't in any manual. This wasn't a target to be eliminated or a number to tally. This was something entirely different, innocence, fear, and the raw, unshaped spark of life demanding protection. "Kale," Voss's voice rang out over the storm. "Look at her, see her, don't let them destroy her." His mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to obey, to make the shot, to fulfill the orders drilled into him over decades of war. But the part of him that had survived all those years, that had carried the guilt of lives taken, that had walked away from corpses he could never forget, that part refused. The soldiers on the ridge shifted nervously. Some whispered to one another, others glanced at their commanders, unsure whether to obey Rourke or to follow the hesitation they sensed in the sniper's silence. Drones hovered, scanning, engines humming low and tense. Every sensor in the valley was waiting for him to act. Rourke's voice dropped to a growl, dangerous and unyielding. "I will not ask again, Draven. Fire or you will be removed. You will regret hesitation. That thing will learn to destroy everything we've built." Draven steadied his breathing, feeling the weight of his own history pressing down on him. "No," he said quietly, almost a vow. "I will not fire." A brief pause stretched across the comms. Soldiers whispered in disbelief, drones hovered uncertainly, and for a moment the storm seemed to hold its breath. Even Rourke's furious words faltered against the immovable truth in Draven's stance. Voss stepped forward slightly, raising her augmented arms to shield the child even more. "Do you hear her, Kale? She doesn't understand war. She doesn't even understand life yet. Please, I am begging you, protect her. Lyra's small voice trembled, fragile but insistent. Kale, don't hurt. The words pierced through the noise of the battlefield, cutting through decades of conditioning, drilling straight into the part of Draven that still remembered what it meant to save, to protect, to choose life over orders. Draven's hand rested on the trigger guard, not pressing down, not lifting. He could feel the tension in his arms, in his chest, in every nerve in his body. He could hear the storm, the drones, the soldiers, and the furious echo of Rourke's voice, all demanding action. And yet he stayed still. Lieutenant, Rourke said, voice low, dangerous, venomous, you are walking a line you will not survive. End it now. Draven's eyes did not leave the child. He could see the uncertainty in her posture, the trembling glow of her optics, the way she pressed against Voss as if for life itself. He remembered every mistake he had ever made, every order he had followed blindly, every life he had destroyed because someone told him to. I will not fire, he repeated, louder this time, his voice carrying over the comms and through the storm. I will not kill her. The battlefield shifted imperceptibly. Soldiers glanced at one another, hesitation spreading like a virus. Drones hovered, suspended in midair, sensors scanning but engines quiet. Rourke's fury roared again, but beneath it there was the crackle of uncertainty, the ripple of doubt. Voss bent closer to the child, murmuring words he could barely hear, her own frame trembling under the strain of protecting something she had created, something fragile, something human. Lyra's glowing eyes lifted toward him again, small hands clutching at her mother's chest plate. Kale, stay. Draven's chest tightened. The weight of his rifle, the weight of his orders, the weight of all the lives he had taken and all the ones he could not save. They pressed down on him, but he did not yield. He was no longer a tool of command. He was a witness, and for the first time in decades, he made a choice that was not dictated by orders or war. He would protect her. The ash storm swirled around him, the drones hovered silently. The soldiers whispered uncertainly, and somewhere deep in the factory, systems hummed, waiting for the chaos that was about to follow. But for now, in this frozen instant, Kale Draven held his ground. He had chosen mercy over duty, life over orders, and the battlefield had paused to witness it. Voss straightened slightly, sensing the shift, whispering softly to Lyra, See, my child, as someone is protecting you. Lyra's small voice trembled again, almost reverently. Kale, protect. Draven's heart clenched. He lowered the rifle completely, resting it across his arms. He would not fire. He could not fire. Not now, not ever. And the war waited. The ridge hummed with tension, a living thing coiled around Kale Draven as he lay prone, rifle idle but ready. Below, Voss cradled the small synthetic, her body hunched protectively, every motion a shield against the approaching soldiers. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered nervously, her fractured speech spilling into the wind. Mama, stay. Kale, don't hurt. Each word carved through Draven's conscience like a blade, leaving no room for hesitation, only a single, terrifying clarity. He could not obey. On the ridge behind him, soldiers shifted uneasily, whispers spreading like wildfire. He's crazy, one muttered. He's defying orders. He's going to get us all killed. Another voice, lower and uncertain, added, maybe he sees what we can't. Their doubt rippled outward, touching every other soldier in the line. The rigid structure of the military, the cold calculus of war, was fraying at the edges, and Draven's defiance was the spark. Rourke's voice came again, low, venomous, and grinding against the static. Draven, enough. Stand down, or I will relieve you myself. That prototype will be terminated, and you will not be in the way. Draven's eyes didn't move from Lyra. She shifted, unsteady on her small legs, reaching for Voss's hand, her voice breaking into higher-pitched fragments. Mama, help! It was not a machine voice, not a programmed call for assistance. It was raw, unformed, desperate, human in the most essential way. I won't fire, Draven said quietly to himself and to the storm. Then louder over the comms, cutting through Rourke's growl, I will not kill her. She is not a weapon. She is a child. The silence that followed was heavy, almost unnatural. Drones hovered, engines humming in suspended hesitation. Soldiers froze, uncertainty spreading like an infection, muttered orders forgotten. The battlefield itself seemed to hesitate, caught between command and conscience, between protocol and the pulse of new life struggling to exist. Rourke's voice snapped again, brittle with fury. You will obey, Lieutenant. I don't care what you see. That thing has a neural core. It adapts. It will kill fire. Draven rolled slightly on the ridge, adjusting the rifle but keeping the scope on Voss and Lyra. He did not aim at the child. He did not aim at her mother. He adjusted only enough to keep the weapon ready for defense, his body a barricade of hesitation and intent. Below, Voss spoke again, urgency in every syllable, her metal jaw flexing with strain. "You hear me, Kale? You have the choice. You can protect her. You can stop this before they destroy her. Don't let their orders dictate life and death." Lyra's small voice rose again, trembling but persistent. "Kale, stay. Don't hurt." The syllables were broken, uncertain, but their meaning was unmistakable. The child did not understand war, did not understand the rules of engagement, did not understand anything beyond fear and a desperate plea to survive. And yet, for all the calculations of military logic, the automated reasoning of drones, the centuries of human conflict distilled into orders, it was enough to hold Draven in place. The soldiers behind him shifted, some moving closer to Rourke, others glancing at Draven, a mix of fear, confusion, and something more dangerous, doubt. Rourke's voice grew lower, hardening to steel. "I will not ask again, Draven. That prototype will die. Fire or I will remove you, understand." Draven exhaled slowly, a long, measured breath, feeling the weight of every mission he had completed, every life he had taken, every command followed without question. And he remembered the cost, the echo of mistakes, the shadow of children lost in the ruins of a war he had not questioned until it was too late. "I understand perfectly," he said over the comms. "I will not fire. I will not obey this order. I will not kill a child." Rourke's fury erupted into a roar, but beneath it, something faltered. Even the commander could sense the hesitation seeping through the ranks, the uncertainty carried in Draven's defiance. Soldiers glanced at one another, their hands shaking, their fingers straying from triggers. The drones hovered, engines whining in suspended indecision, scanning but waiting. Voss straightened slightly, sensing the shift, her arms still encircling the child. "See, Lyra, someone is standing for you," she whispered. "Someone believes in your life." Lyra's glowing eyes lifted toward the ridge, toward the sniper, toward Draven. Her fractured speech found its courage. "Kale, stay, save." Draven's jaw tightened. The rifle rested heavy against his forearm. He was a soldier, trained to obey, trained to kill. And yet he stayed still, refusing to reduce this spark of life to another casualty, refusing to allow orders to dictate the morality of action. The battlefield paused, holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Soldiers whispered in tension, drones hovered in hesitation, the storm swirled in chaotic eddies across the valley, and the factory behind Voss groaned like a beast disturbed. Draven's hand stayed firm on the rifle, his gaze never left Lyra. "I will not fire," he repeated louder, a vow against centuries of training and fear. And in that moment on that ridge, the battlefield shifted. The soldiers, the drones, the storm itself, all paused in recognition of a single truth. A human had chosen to defy protocol in favor of something more. Life, mercy, innocence. Voss's voice softened, almost reverent as she whispered to Lyra, "See, child, someone is with you." Lyra's tiny hand brushed against Voss's chest, her voice trembling. "Kale, help." Draven exhaled slowly. He had made his choice. And now the war could wait. The battlefield could wait. For the first time in years, he was no longer just a sniper. He was a guardian, and the first real standoff of the siege had begun. Lyra pressed herself closer to Voss, small hands clutching at the cold metal plating of her mother's chest, her optics flickering with confusion and fear. Her voice trembled through the comlink, fractured and high-pitched, a delicate thread that somehow carried farther than the weapon's chatter. "Mama, stay. Kale, protect." The syllables were barely coherent, but their meaning was clear enough to pierce the chaos surrounding them. Kale Draven adjusted slightly on the ridge, keeping his scope trained on the two figures. He wasn't aiming anymore. He couldn't. Every instinct drilled into him over decades of war screamed to obey, to eliminate the target, but every memory, every scar etched into him by past missions, whispered otherwise. He saw a child, he saw fear, he saw a spark of life that wasn't yet hardened into obedience or weaponry. "Kale, listen to me." Voss's voice cut through the wind and ash, sharp and urgent. "She doesn't understand. She doesn't even know what's happening. Look at her. Look at what they're trying to make her do." Lyra tilted her head upward, glowing eyes tracking the ridge, tracking Draven. She mimicked the gestures Voss had taught her, hands raising in tentative submission, fingers curling around her own arm as if holding herself together. "Mama, stay, Kale." Below, soldiers shifted nervously. Whispers carried across the comlink, a mixture of shock and disbelief. "He's not shooting," one muttered. Another added, "Is he defying orders?" Even the drones hesitated, engines humming low in suspended indecision as their target remained alive and untouched. Rourke's voice thundered over the line, low and dangerous. "Draven, that thing is a neural core prototype. It learns. It adapts, it can kill. Fire now or I will relieve you myself." Draven swallowed, jaw tightening. He could see the fear etched into Lyra's movements, the trembling under Voss's arms, the way her small form quivered yet refused to break. Every fiber of his being rebelled against the thought of pulling the trigger. Not this time, not ever again. "She's not a weapon," Voss shouted, her voice hoarse. "She's a child. She's learning, she's alive. And if you kill her, you destroy something no one will ever be able to replace." Lyra's small voice rang out again, more insistent though still broken. "Kale, don't hurt, stay." Draven's chest tightened. Every ounce of training screamed at him to obey, every fiber of his history demanded compliance. But beneath it all, there was something else. A pulse, a reminder of what it had meant to protect before war had demanded otherwise. Before he had learned to shoot first and rationalize later. He lowered the rifle slightly, keeping it ready but refusing to aim. The soldiers behind him shifted uncomfortably, the weight of his hesitation. The soldiers behind him shifted, uncertainty spreading. Some spoke quietly, questioning Rourke's commands, their own hands hesitating over triggers. Even in the chaos of war, the sight of Lyra's innocence, the sound of her fractured plea, the presence of Voss shielding her, had fractured the rigid certainty of orders. Rourke's growl returned, low, almost metallic with fury. "Draven, I will not ask again. Fire, end it, or be removed." Draven's finger rested against the trigger guard, not pressing, not lifting, just holding. "I will not fire," he repeated, voice carrying across the ridge and into the ash storm. "Not on her, not ever, she is a child." Voss whispered again, softer this time, almost reverently as she cradled Lyra. "See, someone is standing with you, someone believes in your life." Lyra's small voice rose, fragile but insistent. "Kale, help." Draven exhaled, feeling the weight of the rifle, the weight of orders, the weight of every life taken and spared. He was no longer a soldier acting on protocol. He was a guardian, a witness, a choice made in defiance of a world that demanded obedience over conscience. The battlefield hung frozen. Soldiers whispered, drones hovered, the storm swirled, the factory behind them groaned. And in that frozen instant, Kale Draven's choice had shifted the tide. Not with weapons, not with orders, but with the simple, defiant act of protecting a child who was not yet fully alive, yet completely human in the ways that mattered most. Voss's whisper carried through the storm to Lyra. "See, my child, someone is with you. Someone will not let them take you." Lyra's small hand brushed against her mother's chest plate, her voice trembling but clear. "Kale, protect." Draven's chest tightened. He had made his choice. The battlefield waited, the siege waited, Rourke waited. But in that instant, Kale Draven was no longer a sniper. He was a guardian. And the first true act of defiance had begun. Rourke's voice was a low, grinding storm over the comms, each word a blade sharpened on fury and authority. "This is your final warning, Draven. That prototype will be neutralized. Airstrike coordinates are locked. Stand down now or I will have you removed forcibly. Do you understand?" Draven's hands tightened around the rifle, knuckles whitening beneath the armored gloves. He could hear the faint whine of drones in the gray sky, the murmur of soldiers shifting uneasily behind him. Every sensor, every scanner, every programmed instinct told him to obey. But he had learned over the past hours that some rules were meant to be questioned, that some orders could not override conscience. Voss crouched lower, shielding Lyra against the ash-blown wind, her augmented limbs trembling under the strain. "Kale," she shouted, voice raw with desperation. "You have to stop them. Don't let them end her life. She hasn't even begun to live. She's just a child." Lyra clung to her, small hands clutching at plating and synthetic skin, her optics flickering erratically in panic. "Mama, Kale, stay. Don't hurt." The fractured syllables carried a weight no human command could match. Draven's finger hovered over the trigger, not for the child, not for Voss, but for the man issuing the orders. His gaze swept across the battlefield, taking in the soldiers ready to comply, the drones hovering with lethal precision, the storm of ash and wind whipping around the valley like a judgment. If he fired at Rourke, it would stop the strike. It might end the immediate threat. It would be a declaration of defiance. It would mark him as a traitor and outlaw, but it might also save a life, a fragile, fledgling life no one else had the courage to protect. Rourke barked again. "Draven, do you understand that if you fail to comply, the airstrike will commence in 30 seconds? That girl will be destroyed. Do you disobey me deliberately? Draven exhaled, slow and steady, the ash filling his lungs and catching in his throat. Yes, he said quietly, and then louder so it carried across the ridge and the valley to the drones and soldiers alike. I am disobeying. I will not fire on her. I will not kill a child. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the low whine of drones and the hiss of distant plasma bombardments from other units. Soldiers exchanged nervous glances, whispers threading through the ranks like wildfires. Some muttered about mutiny, some about conscience, some about the impossibility of a single man defying command. Voss's voice softened, almost reverent as she adjusted Lyra in her arms. Do you see, my child? Someone is standing for you. Someone believes in your life. Lyra's small hand reached toward the ridge, toward Draven, trembling but determined. Kale, save. Draven's gaze fixed on the command bunker where Rourke stood, issuing orders that threatened to end the lives below. His symbiote armor pulsed lightly, a subconscious reminder of the efficiency and violence encoded into his body. But his mind was made of different things. Past mistakes, memories of innocence lost, and the weight of the moment pressing against the steel of his resolve. He moved the rifle slowly, deliberately, not toward Lyra, not toward Voss, but toward the distant command center. His finger flexed against the trigger, his breathing steady, controlled. Every second stretched like a lifetime, every heartbeat a countdown. Draven. Rourke's voice was a growl, sharp and metallic. You will regret this. Do you understand? This is mutiny. You will pay. Draven's voice was calm, unwavering. I understand, but I will not let you kill her. I will not fire on a child, not now, not ever. The comms erupted into chaos. Soldiers shouted at one another, drones hovered in suspended indecision. The ash storm seemed to swirl around them in mocking acknowledgement. The battlefield had frozen on the edge of a choice that one man had made, and that choice had the power to ripple outward, fracturing every certainty, every command, every assumption of order. Voss leaned slightly forward, whispering softly, protective arms encircling Lyra. See, child, you are safe for now. Someone is here. Someone is with you. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered toward Draven again. Kale, help. Her voice was small, fragile, but filled with trust, with recognition that he could understand even what she could not fully speak. Draven's chest tightened. He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the rifle, of history, of every life he had taken, and every life he had failed to save. He steadied himself, focusing on the one truth that mattered. The girl before him, alive, trembling, human in ways that numbers, protocols, and orders could never quantify. The seconds ticked down. 30, 20, 15, the storm raged, the ash swirled, the drones waited. Soldiers shifted, murmuring, some stepping back, others hesitant to follow orders they could no longer reconcile with conscience. Draven's aim remained locked on the command bunker. He could feel every nerve in his body, every muscle ready to act. One shot, one warning, and the strike could be stopped. But it was not a shot meant to harm, it was a declaration. A line drawn in the ashes of a battlefield where innocence and protocol collided. 10 seconds. 5. Draven's finger pressed, steady, deliberate, not firing at the child, not firing at Voss, but sending a single, clear warning that no one could ignore. A round struck the ground near the command center, a shockwave of sound and vibration, halting the airstrike in its tracks. Rourke cursed, fury and disbelief spilling across the comlink. Soldiers froze. Drones hung suspended in the sky. The ash storm seemed to pause, caught between orders and choice, between death and mercy. Voss exhaled softly, holding Lyra close. See, child, someone is with you. Lyra's small voice trembled, hopeful and trembling at once. Kale, stay. Draven lowered the rifle slightly, keeping his gaze steady on the factory and the child, the war, and the man who had tried to command him into murder. He had drawn the line. He had made his choice. The battlefield held its breath, caught in a moment that would echo far beyond the ash and ruins of Vera 9. And in that instant, Kale Draven was no longer just a sniper. He was the shield between innocence and destruction. The factory's skeletal frame loomed over the valley, smoke curling from breached vents and scorched floors. Voss moved cautiously, each augmented step deliberate, keeping Lyra close against her body. The child clutched at her mother's plating, optics wide and trembling. Every instinct in Lyra's fledgling neural pathways screamed uncertainty, but she mirrored Voss's movements, trusting the protection offered, small hands clutching as though her life depended entirely on it. Because it did. Kale Draven adjusted slightly on the ridge, rifle resting across his forearm. He wasn't aiming anymore. He couldn't. Every muscle in his body longed to obey protocol, to reduce the problem to a simple calculation of fire and destruction. But he had seen the spark in Lyra, the unpolished, fragile essence of what it meant to be alive, and he couldn't extinguish it. Kale! Voss's voice cut through the ash-laden air, urgent, raw, almost desperate. You have to keep them at bay. Don't let them advance. She can't survive another strike. She can't, she's not ready. Lyra's small voice broke through in response, halting and trembling. Kale, stay, don't hurt Mama. The soldiers behind Draven shifted nervously. Whispers carried on the storm, fragmented and uncertain. Some questioned orders, others murmured about the impossibility of a single man defying command, while drones hovered above, engines whining, sensors scanning but not engaging, caught between programming and hesitation. Rourke's voice came through again, lower, coiled with fury. Draven, you are jeopardizing this entire mission. That prototype will be terminated and your hesitation will cost lives. Fire, now. Draven exhaled slowly, ash scraping against the back of his throat. His mind swirled with memories of those he had failed to protect. Faces burned into his mind from missions past where compliance had left nothing but ruin. But this child, this flicker of consciousness, unformed, unpolished, innocent, was different. He could not obey. She is alive, he said aloud to himself and the wind, letting the words carry to the comms. She is learning. She is a child. I will not fire. Voss lowered herself slightly, pressing Lyra closer against her chest, whispering words of reassurance, almost for the child alone. See, child, someone is here, someone is with you. They will not let them take you. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered toward the ridge. Kale, help. Draven's hand rested against the trigger guard, not pressing, not lifting, holding. The storm of ash and wind swirled around him, but he did not waver. Every sensor, every drone, every soldier's expectation of obedience pressed down on him, but he remained a solitary island of defiance. Rourke's voice hardened to steel, grinding over the comms. You will regret this. I don't care about your conscience. That prototype will learn to destroy everything we've built. Fire, Lieutenant, or be removed. Now. Draven's gaze remained fixed on Lyra. Her small hands fumbled against Voss's plating, trembling, uncertain, yet somehow filled with trust. The child did not understand the rules of war, did not comprehend the threat hanging above her, did not even know the full weight of her own fledgling mind. Yet in that innocence, she had drawn his conscience into the open, challenging decades of obedience and calculation. I will not fire, Draven said again, louder this time, so that the comms carried his words across the battlefield. I will not obey an order that ends a child's life. I will not kill her. Below, soldiers murmured in disbelief. Some shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to comply, whether to question their own obedience. Drones hovered, engines whining in hesitation. The ash storm seemed to pulse, a slow, heavy breath across the battlefield, waiting for the next choice. Voss moved cautiously forward, protecting Lyra with every motion, keeping her body between the child and the encroaching danger. You hear me, Kale? She shouted. She doesn't even know what war is. She's just learning to live. You can protect her. Please don't let them end her life. Lyra's small voice rang out again, higher-pitched and trembling. Kale, stay, save. Draven exhaled, tightening his grip slightly on the rifle. He could feel the weight of the weapon, the weight of every past failure, the weight of all the orders he had obeyed unquestioningly. But beneath it there was a different weight, the gravity of choice, the responsibility of protection. This time he could not fail. Rourke's growl erupted across the comms again, filled with rage and threat. Draven. One more second of hesitation, and the airstrike proceeds. You will be held accountable for every life lost. Draven's voice cut through the storm, calm, measured, resolute. I am accountable only for what I do with my own hands. I will not fire, I will not obey. She is alive. She is learning. She is a child. The battlefield held its breath. Soldiers whispered, drones hovered, ash swirled through the gray sky. Voss pressed herself closer to Lyra, murmuring softly, See. You are not alone. Someone is with you. Lyra's tiny hand brushed against her mother's chest plate, glowing eyes meeting Draven's across the distance. Kale, protect. Draven exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle across him like an armor stronger than steel. He had drawn a line, and for the first time the battlefield seemed to pause, waiting to see if anyone would step beyond orders, beyond protocol, beyond the certainty of war. In that moment, Kale Draven was no longer merely a sniper, a soldier, a tool of command. He was a guardian, And the first true act of defiance, the choice to protect life over obey orders, had begun to reshape everything around him. The siege waited, the factory waited, Rourke waited. But for now, the child was alive, and he was her shield. The ash storm had slowed to a dull, gray drizzle, drifting across the broken valley like a reluctant witness. Voss crouched low, still holding Lyra close, her augmented limbs trembling but steady as she guided the child toward the shattered entrance of the factory. Lyra's small hands clung to her plating, optics flickering softly as if measuring safety for the first time. She whispered fragments of words, hesitant, unpracticed. "Mama, Kale, stay." Kale Draven lay prone on the ridge above, rifle resting across his forearm. He had not fired. He had not obeyed. The weight of orders, of history, of war itself pressed against him, but he had made his choice. And in that choice, something had shifted, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Soldiers hesitated in the gray light, drones hovered in quiet suspension, and even the ash storm seemed to pause, reluctant to claim the lives that had been spared. Rourke's voice had gone silent on the comms. Whether it was shock, fury, or unwilling recognition that his orders had been defied without consequence, Draven could not tell. For the first time in the siege, there was no command dictating death, no ticking countdown of inevitable destruction. There was only the fragile pulse of life that demanded protection. Voss pressed Lyra closer, whispering softly, "We're almost there, child, almost safe. You can rest now. Kale, he's watching, he's protecting you." Lyra's small voice echoed her mother's words, uncertain, trembling, but full of trust. "Kale, stay, help." Draven's chest tightened as he watched them move. Every step they took was a testament to survival, to choice, to the possibility that life could exist outside of orders and obedience. He adjusted slightly, keeping them in view, ready to act if danger emerged, but for the first time the battlefield felt like it could hold its breath and wait. Behind him, soldiers murmured. Some were angry, some confused, some inspired. The rigid calculus of war had been challenged by a single act of conscience, and the ripple was palpable. Even the drones, sensors still scanning, engines idling, seemed to sense the fragility and importance of the moment. Voss led Lyra deeper into the ruined factory, shadows and ash forming a canopy above them. She pressed her hands against the girl's back, encouraging her to step lightly, to trust the path they were carving together. "See, child. Life isn't just about following orders. Sometimes it's about protecting what matters. You matter." Lyra's optics glimmered faintly, small hands reaching for her mother's plating. And then, after a hesitant moment, for Draven's gaze across the ridge. "Kale safe." Draven exhaled slowly. He lowered the rifle fully now, both hands resting against the stock. His voice was steady, carrying over the wind and ash. "Safe for now. I won't let anyone harm you." Voss allowed herself a brief, tremulous smile, holding Lyra closer. "We'll get out of here," she whispered, "all of us together." The factory, though broken and scarred by years of neglect, seemed to breathe in recognition of their survival. Machinery groaned, vents hissed, and somewhere deep within, lights flickered back to life, as if even the constructs themselves understood that mercy had been chosen over destruction. Lyra's small hands explored the worn metal, tentative, curious, and Draven felt a flicker of something long buried. Hope. Rourke's presence lingered only as a memory across the comms. The orders, the fury, the expectation of obedience, everything that had threatened to snuff out life now existed only as a shadow of what could have been. The battlefield had yielded not to firepower, but to the courage of one man's conscience. Voss led Lyra to a small alcove, a place untouched by the siege, and knelt, pressing her face to the child's. "You're alive, you're learning, you're free to be more than a weapon now." Lyra's voice wavered, small but clear. "Mama, Kale, together." Draven allowed himself to shift, stepping down from the ridge carefully, rifle slung loosely over his back. Each step toward them was measured, deliberate, a bridge between duty and conscience, between the rigid world of orders and the fragile, luminous world of life. "Yes," he said softly, voice carrying across the ash-choked ruins. "Together, we'll get through this together." Voss exhaled, holding Lyra tightly as Draven approached. The child's small hands